Hello, for those of you who are back, welcome back. And for those of you who are new, hi, my name's David. I make videos talking about media that I love and just want to talk about. This is my companion piece for my season 3 retrospective video for the Magnus Archives, which is a horror podcast written by Jonathan Sims, directed by Alexander J. Newell, produced by the Rusty Quill Company. You know all that jazz for those of you who are back. This is me ranking all 40 episodes of season 3. Like I said, this is a companion piece for my season 3 video. I also have ranking videos for seasons 1, 2, 4, and 5. This is the middle one. This is the last one because I started season 4 and 5 first before 1, 2, and 3. But whatever, we're here now. And yes, big spoiler warnings for, I would say, the entirety of this of the show, because there's things I allude to in the future as well, maybe sometimes depending on the episode. Just general spoiler warning for the entirety of the show and the season, obviously. So let's get into it. These are my rankings. I didn't realize before, but like my boyfriend mentioned it, like naming the tiers instead of just S, A, B, C, D, but like naming them something funny. That's inspired by Casey Alonso. That's where I got it from, at least from what I remember, because her ranking videos, she names them like themed for the ranking, and so I got that idea from her. My boyfriend pointed it out, and I was like, oh yeah, that's so true. I didn't think of that. But it was Casey Alonso that inspired this. So for the S tier, we have what the ghost guest host. I'm just gonna be when I'm ranking. I'm just gonna say what the ghost. It's what the ghost guest host. And it's like this episode is like so good that it can guest host What the Ghost, which is obviously the podcast that Georgie Barker, who is the character in the Magnus Archives, creates and hosts herself. And so I think like these episodes would be good enough to be guest host for What the Ghost. You get that. For A tier, we have a friend of Jerry's. That means you are a friend of Gerard Key, which means you can call him Jerry. Thus, you are A tier, a friend of Jerry's. For B tier, middle of the road, we have Moisturized by Nikola Orsanov. And so it's like, it's good that you're getting moisturized, because you always have to moisturize your skin, but also you're being moisturized by Nikola Orsanov, which is not like the best. But that means your skin's really important for like the unknowing, but it also means your skin's really good for the unknowing. So it's like middle of the road, still pretty like, I would still count these as like good episodes, just middle of the road episodes, moisturized by Nikola Orsanov. In C tier, we have Ritual Stopped by Gertrude. That means your ritual was stopped by Gertrude, which, haha, not the best. And that's like C tier. That's how I like rationalize C tier. And then D tier, lowest tier, is Eaten by the Flesh Pig. You got eaten by the Flesh Pig. I didn't like you, so you got eaten by the Flesh Pig. I don't like the Flesh Pig. Spoiler alert. But you got eaten by the Flesh Pig. That's D tier, the lowest tier. In terms of my criteria for ranking these episodes, it's very nebulous to me. It tends to be a combination of like technical appreciation, personal appreciation, nostalgia, aka how I felt when I first listened to it, or how I feel like when I think about it. Technical, personal, nostalgia, story wise, what it does for the story itself, and also just like pedantic stuff. I would also say like it might be a sixth one. It would be like personal enjoyment, which is different than personal feelings. Because if it's some episode, I'm like, yeah, this is a good episode or whatever. But like some episode, I'm like, this is entertaining, and there's a difference there for me. But like I said, it's very nebulous, and I'll try to make the nebulosity, which is not a word, more concrete, to make it make sense. But like I said, like these are my own opinions. So yes, it's a very nebulous sort of ranking system, but we're gonna have fun with it, you know? So yes, once more, spoiler alert for the entirety of the season, and let's get started. Episode 81, A Guest from Mr. Spider, is going in A Friend of Jerry's. I enjoy this episode because it is a really good starter episode. Like I've talked before of the like finale episodes, and how like they stack up in my opinion. But the beginning episodes, I think 81 is a really good beginner episode of the season. Have I talked about those before? I feel like I have. I don't remember. All of them are pretty good in my opinion, and 81 is really good as well. Of course, we have John talking. Well, first he's like talking about, hey, I'm on the run or whatever. Talks about how he started getting into lighteners or like learning about lighteners and stuff, and like him finding a book called I guess for Mr. Spider. Actually, no, he didn't find it. His grandmother, who raised him because his parents died when he was younger, his grandmother raised him, and the only way to keep him like quiet or keep him like not boisterous, loud young child was to give him books to read. He was very pedantic about the books he read, and she would just get a bunch of books and just not throw them at him, but basically just throw them at him and be like, take whatever you want. And one of those grabs was I guess for Mr. Spider, and so he started reading it, and it was it's actually like really creepy because it's a children's story. And children's stories, when they're angled towards horror, it like adds a little like spice to it, in my opinion, at least. I don't know how else to explain it. It's like talking about Mr. Spider who's in his apartment, and people quote unquote keep knocking at his door and bringing like food or something, and the people are of course insects, and he's like, I don't like the narrator, the text is Mr. Spider didn't like it, and then like the door closes or whatever, and then as the story progresses, his apartment gets more and more dirty, and obviously it's implying that when the insects arrive at the door and they offer something to him, he doesn't like it, so he eats the insects instead. And it's heavy implications there, and I do like that implication a lot because it doesn't have to be said what happened, especially with the narration of John saying that like as it kept going, the apartment got more dirty. Eventually, John as a child is reading this, and a bully appears and like knocks the book off or something. He's like, "What are you reading, you nerd?" He picks it up and starts reading himself. He's like 5 to 6 years older than him, and the bully starts reading the book himself. And I assume he starts from the very beginning or whatever. And younger John, follows him as he begins to walk around. John discovers that he was just in the middle of like the street or something. He never realized where he went when he was reading the book. And the bully just reaches like this door and knocks on it in the same pattern that the book says that people knock on his door. And the door opens, and like spider arms come out and grab the bully, and the kid dies, and John survives. He says he doesn't remember the name of the boy who was killed in place of John, and so that got John interested in the supernatural, and that got him interested in lighteners, and got him like snowball domino falling to here after having interviewed Jurgen Leitner in the episode prior and then seeing his dead body. So obviously this is also when we get that he's been staying at Georgie Barker's house because he used to date. And yeah. Also, this was the episode where John was marked by the web, or at least shown when he was marked by the web, which is a really important aspect for season 4 in terms of Elias's plan to do stuff. But this is when he got marked by the web, which is also a really important part for the entirety of the story. Episode 82, Eyewitnesses, is going in Moisturized by Nicola Orsanov. Obviously, this is when we have Daisy Tonner, voiced by Faye Roberts, coming to the Magnus Institute and interrogating Martin, Tim, and Elias, voiced by Alexander J. Newell, Mike LeBeau, and Ben Meredith, the three of them. And Daisy's interrogating them as to where John is, because obviously when Elias killed Jurgen Leitner in episode 80, they found the body, and so the police were called, and Daisy's investigating, and she thinks that John killed Jurgen, and thinks that he killed Gertrude Robinson in the past, as well as is responsible for the disappearance of Sasha James, who obviously was killed in season 1, replaced by the not Sasha, which was also not killed, defeated, who was trapped in hide and seek, episode 79, hide and seek. And like this episode, it's pretty fine. The discussions that Daisy has with different people highlight different character arcs in a way. With Martin, it's definitely like he is very flustered when she says that everyone thinks that him and John are like closest together, or like he's the closest person to John. Which honestly, at this point, I disagree. I think the closest person is like Basira, and we'll get that a little bit later. But Martin's definitely flustered by that implication there. And also, this is when we get Daisy saying she has full operational discretion for investigation, which means that basically no oversight. With Tim, he's like, I don't know what's happening. If I knew where John was, I'd tell you. With Elias, he threatens her and basically delivers a statement of when she killed and when she killed Calvin Benchley, who was this like childhood boy, encountered like a slaughter monster and made him empowered by the slaughter. And Daisy like didn't like that he was killing people, and so she killed him. He was the first person she killed. I don't remember if this was before or after her becoming like a full-time like policewoman, but it's like she did this illegally anyways. And Elias threatens her. He's like, if you don't leave, I will show this to your bosses. And she's like, I'm gonna kill you. And then she leaves. But yeah, this episode, it's pretty middle of the road for me. Episode 83, Drawing a Blank, is going in moisturized by Nicola Orsonov. This is when we have, coincidentally, the first appearance of Nicola Orsonov, not named, but seen, quote unquote. It's a statement of Chloe Ashburt, who is a little person with dwarfism in a department store, and her encounter with like an animated mannequin that ends up killing her boss, Lana Billings. I think there's some implication that when Nicola Orsonov appears in the future, I think there's an implication that she took some of Lana's skin, and so it's Lana Billings' skin that is on Nicola, which is great. Obviously, this statement was a statement that arrived to Georgie's house, sent by Elias without John knowing that it was Elias, and he's like, I don't know who's sending these statements. It's a stalker. It's a stalker statement. This episode's pretty fine. Nothing really like big happens here besides like the introduction of Nicola Orsonov, and even then, it's very much like you wouldn't know it was Nicola Orsonov until like a little later. And for someone who's like first time listening to the episode, the mannequin's just kind of like creepy, and it was pretty creepy. Like mannequins walking around is definitely a big part of like horror, and so this episode's pretty fine for me. Episode 84, Possessive, is going in Ritual Stopped by Gertrude. This episode is about the corruption and it's Martin reading out a statement. The statement giver is Adrian Weiss, who's talking about his friend Gordy, who helps this older woman out in a dump, and he thinks that she's a witch. And Gordy disappears for a while. No one's really worried except for Adrian Weiss, and so he goes to try to find out what happened to his friend, and he breaks into the woman's dump and finds her like doing some creepy, like disgusting stuff with like trash. He ends up like destroying it, and that's it. There's some form of implications here that I just don't really enjoy. Also, like, it's kind of disgusting, and yeah, that's a corruption, but it's kind of disgusting. I don't like it because of that. I do like the implication at the end where Adrian's older and he left home and then came back home for a while, and he was just talking with some people he used to be friends with, and or like newer people or whatever, and they were like talking about how they need to like take some furniture out to the dump. And he's like, what dump? He's like, oh, it's a dump by this old recluse. They call it Gordy's dump, which they used to call it, I think it was Maggie's dump or whatever, like the old woman's dump. And so it's implied that the young kid, whatever the witch was doing, whatever the corruption witch was doing, succeeded and made Gordy turn into the corruption avatar or whatever and own the dump at that point. I like that implication. Otherwise, it doesn't really work for me. It's kind of gross But I like Martin's reading for the first time, like an entire full statement. But yeah, it's not the best for me. Episode 85, Upon the Stair, is going in Moisturized by Nicola Orsanov. I think this is a fine episode. I never really took a good liking to like poetic language, poetic structure, and so this is about a man who's being inflicted by the spiral after reading a poem called Antigonish. In my season 3 video, I said antagonish, but it's Antigonish, which is a town in Nova Scotia, I believe, and it's the poem itself is specifically about like a haunting. And the guy actually begins to see a man who wasn't there upon the stairs. And I do like the flowy sort of nature of it and the ambiguity of it. I especially like the part where he's talking with his parents and they ask him where his son went, and he isn't able to answer, and his like dad dies, but then his parents walk away. And so I don't really know if his dad actually died there, but like I like the ambiguity of that just because it's the spiral, but it's not like amazing, which is why it's going in the middle of the road for me. But yeah, the spiral episodes, the technique of it is something that I have to get used to, which is why it's harder for me to enjoy it. Episode 86, Tucked In, is going in Ritual Stalked by Gertrude. This episode of The Dark is Melanie King, voiced by Lydia Nichols, is in the archives now. She got a job in episode 84, Possessive. And now she's reading a statement of Benjamin Hattendi, who was killed by what I think is the Still and Lightless Beast. And like I've said prior, the Still and Lightless Beast is never described. It's only called the Still and Lightless Beast. And this monster was never named, but it was described as this like amorphous blob in the dark that spoke or whatever. And I feel like this fits the idea of what the Still and Lightless Beast was, especially with the description that we got in 9 A Father's Love of the Still and Lightless Beast attacking the door of Julia Montauk's house. And so I say this is the Still and Lightless Beast. And a lot of people also say that this is one of the most terrifying moments in Magnus Archives, where the Still and Lightless Beast goes up to Benjamin Hattendi, who's hiding underneath the blanket, and he says, the blanket never did anything. To me, that wasn't terrifying. That felt hokey. Honestly, it made me think of like creepypastas and not like the good creepypastas. It made me think of those sorts of like stories where it's like, ha ha ha, the old man that you saw in the road has been dead for a long time, or the person you were messaging online never had a phone or something. Those sort of like things. I was like, the thing actually never was. And I was like, okay, it's great. Sorry, I just don't think it was that scary. It felt hokey, and I didn't enjoy that. The one aspect that I do remember really enjoying actually was when Melanie starts her recording and she says marker and makes a like, I think she makes a sound of like or whatever, or like claps her hands. That's it. Makes a marker sound. I think that's a really interesting like character detail there. Also, this is when Tim learns about Sasha or not Sasha, and he gets a little emotional about it. And I think this is when he leaves to Malaysia. But yes, this episode, sorry, kind of hokey for me. Episode 87, The Uncanny Valley, is going in A Friend of Jerry's. This is a Gertrude episode. This is one of the stalker statements that John gets. And here we have Gertrude reading out a statement of Sebastian Skinner, who's a plumber, who goes to like a remote house in the woods. And he's met by a Megan. I think it's Megan Shaw. I can't be sure about that. I think he only calls her Megan, but Megan Shaw was one of the people missing in episode 1 Anglerfish, and we've seen people from episode 1 Anglerfish who are missing appear, like Daniel Rawlings, Sarah Baldwin, and so Megan Shaw is also named there. So this could be the same Megan, who is of course Nicola Orsanov, and she's like, she called the plumber because the plumbing was not working. He goes there and he like unclogs, and he says there's like some fleshy stuff there, so I unclogged it. And she's like, okay, cool, and he leaves. And then she calls him back and says, hey, can you come back? And he's like, okay. He comes back, and throughout it all, he says that he is the most oblivious person. Like he says something along the lines of like, if I see a woman who's like pregnant and she says, "Do you say anything different? Do you see anything different?" And he's like, "Did you cut your hair?" He's that kind of oblivious person, which I found hilarious. And when the second time he comes around, he sees another like gooey stuff, fleshy stuff in the pipe, and doesn't think any of it. When he gets there, he also sees that there another woman, an Asian woman, is there, like watching or laughing or whatever. And so Megan invites him to the barn or whatever, and she opens the door and she's like, "Watch, look at this." And he sees like just like I think this is the processing plant for where the anglerfish takes its victims, and like there was just heads being like worked on or whatever, mannequins. It was a little creepy, uncanny valley. And she says, "You may call this I do not know you," which is the other name for the stranger, which I like. And he runs away, and it's really funny because when he runs away, his door is opened by the Asian woman who's laughing at him, and then he like gets out, and so it's implied that Megan tried to scare him, and it didn't work the first time, and so she called up Jude Perry, the Asian woman's Jude Perry, and was like, "Hey, come watch this idiot," and she does, and just laughs at him or whatever. And then the entire forest is burnt down, and then it just finishes. And Gertrude was like, "If I had known better, I would say this was a joke sent by the stranger because Sebastian Skinner, but it's not." And I like it. I like that a lot. It's really funny, along with the horrifying aspect of the like the processing plant for the anglerfish. And Gertrude voice is always Sue Sims is always just amazing. So I really like this episode a lot for a multitude of different reasons. Episode 88, Dig, is going in a friend of Jerry's. In the same vein as 85, Upon the Stairs, 88 to me has very poetic language to it, especially because there's a lot of repeating, flowing structure of dig, of dig, of dig. And Martin really does a great job. Martin / Alexander J. Newell, but I'm going to credit Martin here. Does a really good job of delivering the dig because it has a hefty weight to it. And also there's a lot of foreshadowing here too, specifically because when Enrique McMillan, who is the guy who finds a lightener while he's looking for stuff on the beach, and it's a lightener that just says dig, and so he gets consumed by the need to dig, and he becomes a buried avatar through that. And when he comes to the Institute, he says that there is something that I have to dig because there's something in the very center here that needs to get out or something. So it's implied he knows about the panopticon, which is underneath the Institute, which is the center of the Watcher's Crown. But this foreshadowing here, very random foreshadowing, I'd like to say. Like, all of a sudden we're getting this. I don't know. Johnny Sims, writer of the Magnus Archives, thinks so far ahead. And I'm like, dude, we wouldn't even hear about the Watcher's Crown until like a little later. So the foreshadowing here is insane. And yeah, I like the flowy nature of the dreamlike nature of this statement because the guy's losing his sanity, and it's not a spiral episode. It's just like dig. It's a buried episode, and so I like it better than Upon the Stair, and it's going in higher tier because of that. Episode 89, Twice as Bright, I'm going to be putting in What the Ghost Guest Host. This is when off of what John learned from 87 Uncanny Valley, he meets with Jude Perry, who is an avatar of the Desolation, and she gives a statement of how she started becoming a Desolation avatar and like the things that she's done and etc. And the voice actress for Jude Perry, Hannah Walker, does a great performance of this character. And there is a moment that I remember that I cannot find for the life of me, but I'll put in an audio clip of it.
At least that's how it feels for me. I don't know how it would feel for you. Maybe you get an itchy eye. I don't care.
Where she delivers like this like nonchalant attitude that I just can't get out of my head. I love her delivery of this, and then learning about the lore of the Desolation as well as lore of Jude Perry and Agnes Montague, and just the lightless flame coals and all that is really fun. Also, this is where John gets marked by the desolation as well when she asks him to shake her hand. And in the beginning episode, he didn't want to do that. He was like, "I'm not stupid. You're gonna burn me." And at the end of it, she's like, "I'll tell you where my crew is if you shake my hand." And so he does, and burns him. And so it's a really important aspect for the story. And so for me, it's a really good episode overall because I love these sort of like lore episodes that like detail some like character thing or story thing. And yeah, I like this episode a lot because of that. Episode 9, Bodybuilder, is going in Eaten by the Flesh Pig. I don't really enjoy this episode a lot. It's very slow. It takes a long time for it to pick up to the like quote unquote horror. And it's about Ross Davenport, who is going to a gym and he's talking about how he got kicked out of the gym for taking steroids, and he wanted to build his body up more, and so he goes to this other gym that he finds run by Jared Hopworth, which he only knows as Jay. And he when he's there late at night at one point, he sees a bunch of like people who are like messed up body horror wise, exercising, but it takes a long time to get to that point. It's very small, very short, and I don't really like that sort of wait. Like when I re-listened to the episode, I was like, can we get on with it? And so I didn't really enjoy it for that aspect. I don't remember any other things around the episode statement besides like character plot stuff. And the statement's just kind of boring to me, unfortunately. Episode 91, A Coming Storm, is going in What the Ghost guest host. Here we have John taking a statement from Mike Crew, and then Mike Crew gets killed by Daisy, who tracked John here. And unfortunately, I talked a lot about this episode in my season 3 video, so I don't want to talk about it a lot here. But here we have Mike talking about how he became being chased by a spiral creature, the Lichtenberg figure, and then finding Ex Altiora and turning into an avatar of the Vast to trap the Lichtenberg figure in Ex Altiora. This is where John gets marked by the Vast and the Hunt because Mike sends him feeling vertigo, so that marks him through that. And then when Daisy kidnaps John for the first time, he gets kidnapped for the first time here too. She's about to like kill him, and so that marks him with the fear of the Hunt as well. So this episode has a lot of like big, like story changing things happening to John, and so I like this episode a lot because of that. Episode 92, Nothing Beside Remains, is going in Moisturized by Nicola Orsonov. I think that some aspects of this are really, really good, and some aspects are not. And so it really balances out to just the midpoint. Elias gives a really quick statement of Barnabas Bennett and his plea to Jonah Magnus to save him from Mordecai Lucas. A lot of different names there. And I actually kind of do like this episode a bit, the statement a bit more than like other letter statements that we get of like letters sent to Jonah Magnus that we get. Because it's short. I like it because it's shorter and it's like succinct, and like the implications are like more interesting there. The rest of it is just a lot of talking, a lot of like things changing around, and so that kind of drags down the pace, but a lot of it is really, really important information. And so it just sort of like balances out to just a middle of the road story of episode for me. Episode 93, Contaminant, is going in A Friend of Jerry's. This is about Lester Chang and his death of his wife and his, it's not mother-in-law, and how his father-in-law is taken over by the corruption. He starts cleaning stuff, and in reality, his entire body is being taken over by this like purple mold, purple fungus or something like that. And it's kind of slower. It's kind of like subtle in terms of its horror, in terms of what it's trying to say, and I do enjoy that. John learns about Breaking in Hope, and he starts like looking into Breaking in Hope because of this episode. And this is a few like corruption episode that's not based on like insects, and I do enjoy this aspect of the corruption because it's not really touched on in many other statements, and so it's a pretty good episode. Episode 94, Dead Woman Walking, is going in a friend of Jerry's. So after 93, after the statement in 93, Georgie sees John doing his thing, and she's like, I don't want you doing this here. He's like, okay, let me tell you that monsters are real. And she's like, I know. And he's like, how do you know that? And so 94 is her telling her Georgie, voiced by Sasha Sienna, who is Johnny Sims' IRL wife. And she's telling him about how when she was in college, she had this friend, Alex, who was like an opposite foil for Georgie. And they were really great friends. And at one point, there was like a protest happening in like a building in their college. And so they went to check it out. And there was a woman there who used to be a cadaver in one of Alex's classes. And the woman is surrounded by people who are like catatonic, and she goes up to her friend, and she passes out, but like she like falls or something. And then she comes up to Georgie, but Georgie covers her ears, and she says, the moment that you die will feel the same as now, something along those lines. And then she becomes like feeling like she has no feeling for like months. But I like the idea that her covering her ears reduced the like power that the woman was doing, because it's assumed that all the people that were around her didn't come out of this state of catatonia, because they were encompassed by all they were fully encompassed by fear of death. And so after that, because of her covering her ears, she got better, and she didn't feel any fear at all, which is a very interesting thing that happens to Georgie. And so I like this episode a lot for those kinds of implications, and for Georgie's story. She is Sasha Sienna, great, great voice storyteller for this episode. Episode 95, Absent Without Leave, is going straight to Eaten by the Flesh Pig. I usually like slaughter episodes, but I just don't like this episode a lot at all. It's a lot of subtle things that are supposed to do something, but they don't do anything for me. And we have Martin reading out a statement of a guy who used to be in the Italian war during World War II, Luca Moretti, who was returned home to Italy, and there's like people said there were deserters in the mountains, and so him and like some other veterans went to like flush them out or whatever, because they were illegal, and it was just people died. And I don't even know if this is fully the slaughter. It could be like the end or something. It's very nebulous in terms of what it's trying to say. And then like at the end of it, when there's a firing squad, and then there was people who died, and it's just I didn't get it. I didn't like it. It I just didn't like it at all. It was boring too. So yeah, sorry. It's eaten by a flesh pig. Episode 96, Return to Sender. I'm putting in Ritual Stopped by Gertrude. I'm conflicted with this episode. I tried to look at it and think of like reasons why it's going that low. And it's just I think it's just kind of boring. We have John reading out a statement of Alfred Breakin and how he got taken over. His shipping service was taken over by the creatures we know as Breakin and Hope. And in a way, I wouldn't say it contradicts, but it's like a small little like snippet of a much bigger, better story from 1 to 6 Heavy Goods in season 4, which we have a full detailing of the Alfred and Breakin story. Here it's just like one little snippet. And I tried to think, because honestly I haven't re-listened to this episode in a while, but I tried to think of what happened in the episode, and it feels very small contained of things that actually happened. And it's because like the statement itself is pretty short. John talks about finding Alfred Breakin, and he says something along the lines of like, after a while I am unfazed by death, and by how much Alfred Breakin worried about, because he found a package that says return to sender, and he knew that Breakin and Hope had set it for himself to open. And John was like, for all that he was worried about what was in the package, it looks like the teeth marks came from the inside. What does that mean? What does that mean? And then at the end of it, we also have John and Daisy confronting Sarah Baldwin in the taxidermy shop, where we learned that the gorilla skin was taken by Gertrude, and so that begins a whole like thing there. But yeah, I think it's just kind of boring. I don't want to put it like low bad because I have minimal negative things for this episode. So yeah, that's gonna be in C tier. Episode 97, We All Ignore the Pit. Is going in a friend of Jerry's. I like this episode a lot because it is the depiction of the ritual of the buried, the sunken sky. And this episode is also pretty loaded with stuff as well. So we have Jackson Ellis, the statement giver, talking about how he moved to Bogota, Washington, which, fun fact, I played Pokemon Scarlet, and my main team is named by Magnus Archives things. And so my I forget what it's called. I forget what this Pokemon is called, but I named him Bogota because of Bogota, Washington, because of the buried and he's a rock. Garnackle, that's it. Like this episode a lot because of the depiction of the ritual, and also at the end of it is when Nicola Orsonov appears, voiced by Jessica Law, and she's like, "Hey, John, find me the gorilla skin, or I'll kill you." And then like I don't know how she leaves, but yeah, this episode is mostly overshadowed in it, like this episode gets a lot of attention by the fandom because of the Nicola Orsonov appearance, but this episode is like really important because of the sunken sky rituals, and I love the rituals and the concept and stuff like that. And so I have a gripe with the Nicola Orsonov stuff because I'm like, yo, could you have not appeared? Could you have appeared in any other episode? You could have appeared in an episode that was less important to like the lore of the world, but it's still a really important episode. So I just enjoy it a lot for multitude of reasons. Episode 98, Lights Out, is going in Eaten by the Flesh Pig. We have Martin reading out a statement of Dr. Algernon Moss about his encounter with what was his name? Maxwell Rayner, and how he got blinded by the Sandman. And it's just very, there's a lot here that I don't care for. For one, Maxwell Rayner, I don't like the idea of his character. He's just a guy who's blind, who's dealing with the dark. I think Manuel Dominguez is a much more interesting dark avatar. Like I said before, Maxwell Rayner gets more exciting after he dies. There's a mention of the John Franklin expedition. Do I have the book here? Yes, I do. I watched the show before I read the book, The Terror, read by Dan Simmons, which is how I know about the John Franklin expedition. And I liked the show a lot. The book was so much better, but like in terms of like just two different mediums. I love the book, John Franklin. It mentioned John Franklin. Hold on, can you get in here? Stop being annoying. The book didn't want to go in, but now it is. There's a mention of the expedition here that Algernon Moss wanted to get the diary from that, and so did Maxwell Rayner, and Algernon Moss won the auction, and because of that, Maxwell Rayner says, "Pray the Sandman doesn't take your eyes," or whatever. And then he's thrust into his past about how he was so scared of the Sandman, who was this like bird-like creature who took your eyes or whatever. It just came out of left field for me. Everything in this episode just comes out of left field and doesn't do anything. He that night he's sleeping and like the Sandman appears and he has to like escape, and the only way he's able to do that is by blinding himself, and he says it's the worst pain ever, whatever. And it doesn't make any sense. It comes out of nowhere, doesn't do anything in the greater story. I don't like it. It's going in Eaten by the Flesh Pig. I hope Algernon Moss gets eaten by the Flesh Pig as well as the Sandman. They should be eaten together. 99, Dust to Dust, is so good. It's going in What the Ghost guest host. This is a Gertrude statement reading out a statement by Robert E. Geiger and his depiction, his experiences in the Dust Bowl. And if I like look at the episode itself, the statement, what it tells, what it does, it is fine. Nothing comes out of this statement. It's more in terms of what Gertrude says about it that's like important to the story. It's also like this was part of Gertrude's research that Elias was sending to John. Gertrude's research regarding like the unknowing, and so Elias didn't know what this stuff was, so he was hoping that John would like parse something out of this. So this was one of those like evidence or notes research that Gertrude was doing. And so I don't remember if it's ever outright stated, but basically this episode chronologically, I guess, is like this episode helps Gertrude reach the conclusion and the stopping of the ritual of the sunken sky. So 99 and 97, and like 99 should have gone before 97 to like depict a story, but it was just interesting that 97, which is the ending of the ritual of the sunken sky, came before her research for the sunken sky in and of itself. And she also mentions John Kilbright here. So this is very interesting sort of like positioning of these episodes, but it's neither here nor there about that. No, this episode's really interesting to me. Her voice acting is always amazing. But it's just the technical aspect of the names. Stephen Brutchen, Robert E. Geiger, the way that Sue Sims hits those notes, and the way she delivers the desperation of the Dust Bowl. Like, I will always remember, I've probably talked about this before, but I will always remember her reading out. I was going to read it out, but I'm just going to have her say this.
At some point, Stefan must have finally died. I know this because when he started talking to us again, there was no way he could have made those noises unless his lungs and throat were fully packed with sediment.
Which is just chilling, and I love it. And like the entire episode's full of like moments like that where it's talking about the buried and stuff. And yeah, I love this episode so much. And just by itself, it's fine. It doesn't really do much, but just the treatment of the episode, Sue Sims, the voice acting, Gertrude Robinson, John gets kidnapped here again. So good. It's so good. I love this episode so much, and it's underappreciated. I want to say it's underappreciated by me and by everyone else. I think this episode is amazing. Episode 100, I guess you had to be there, is going in What the Ghost guest host. This is a very, very funny episode. I think it's a really good episode to have as the like midpoint for the entirety of the show. Like they knew that the show was going to have 200 episodes, so they're like, let's do that. Let's put this 100 episode, very important episode, and make it a joke, basically. So John's gone, and the Institute workers have to deal with other people who are trying to give their statements, and they're just not able to do that. I don't want to go through every single voice actor, so these are all the voice actors that appear and their characters, and I think they do an amazing job at delivering like comedy here, while also trying to like, I don't even want to say try to tell a story, but definitely like try to tell an aspect of the world, and how John is able to like make it smooth. And this is the reality of our lives right now in terms of like someone who's not matching the energy, matching their freak, someone who is like conspiracy nut, someone who cannot focus on what they're trying to say, and someone who is hysterical, and how all those like different types of people would have been able to be condensed into something more focused if John the Archivist was there, but he's not. And so it's just a really fun sort of episode, and I like it a lot. Obviously, the picture is the dog that Robin Lennox talks about. I don't know anything about dogs, but I looked up what the dog was. and just put that picture there because it was hard to find a picture for this episode. Episode 101, Another Twist, is going What the Ghost Guest Host. We have John kidnapped by Nikola Orsanov and the agent of the stranger, tied up in the House of Wax in Yarmouth. And he's there for 2 months. I think this only takes like a month or so. And he's there, and Nicola's like, I'm going to take your skin instead of the gorilla's. Your archivist skin is really important. After that, Michael the Distortion appears, voiced by Luke Boyes, who wants to kill John because he doesn't want the unknowing ritual to complete. And so he wants to kill John so he can't take his skin. And so before that, he wants John to make him tell him a statement. And so John asks him how it'll begin. And so Michael begins telling about Michael Shelley, who also 99, I forgot to mention, was when Michael Shelley appeared speaking to Gertrude, and John was like, I need to know what happened to Michael Shelley for him to become Michael the Distortion. And so in this episode, Michael the Distortion talks about Michael Shelley and how he became interested in the supernatural and started working at the Institute, but he didn't know anything about the supernatural, true supernaturals. And so Gertrude used him to stop the ritual of the Great Twisting, which is the ritual of the spiral, which we get a description of here. And it's a really sad idea that the end of the world was stopped by killing one guy, or not even killing, but just doing something very bad to one guy. And so, I mean, this moment sprouts a lot of discourse regarding Gertrude Robinson and what she does to stop the rituals. And it's a really interesting discourse. There's no right answer. And it's really fun to hear all that. At the end of it, Michael is going to take John into his corridors. He can't open the door. And John's like, you try it. And so Michael opens the door and he dies. And the door opens and Helen is there, who's Helen the Distortion, who was Helen Richardson, voiced by Imogen Harris. And Michael the Distortion is dead and replaced by Helen the Distortion, which is so cool. And she gets better in season 4, but right now she's very confused. And this episode's so good. So I love the rituals, obviously. So the Great Twisting depiction here is so fun. Luke Boyes' voice acting is just amazing. You've all heard of the blooper reel of the label maker of Doom. Yes, I like this episode. Episode 102, Nesting Instinct, is going in a friend of Jerry's. Here we have John reading a statement that Elias gave him to start his investigations toward Gertrude. Also, well, first, this is when John escaped from the stranger, goes up to Elias. He's like, I've been there for 2 months. Why didn't you do anything to help me? And Elias was like, okay, fine. Here are some more details about the unknowing and how to stop it and what we need to learn. Melanie tries to kill Elias as well. That happens here. Elias gives John the statement, Nesting Instinct, to inspire some sort of investigation. It's about Francois Deschamps, who's talking about his friend Benoit Masson, who is falls in love with a beetle, a corruption beetle, and dies from it, maybe? I'm not sure. It's a little ambiguous about that, but it's really fun, sort of depiction of that. It's all written in French, which John reads fluently, which is great. Eye power's coming out, In the statement, it's mentioned that Gertrude and Jerry worked together and talked to Francois Deschamps and was asking if his friend was is a stranger or filth. He says it in French. Étranger ou le salette, I think is pronounced. It's this. And it's a stranger or filth. And so they're looking for stranger stuff, the stranger agents, I guess. And it's a really fun episode. The fact that it was all in French and John's after the fact, he's like, this is all in French. So funny. That was really funny. And there's no big fear of insect but of like a person being taken over by an insect is very corruption interested, aligned. And I like it. I like it. 103 cruelty free. Eaten by the flesh pig. The flesh pig, eaten by the flesh pig. I don't want to talk about this episode that much. I don't like the flesh pig. I think it's stupid. I think it's, we have John reading out a statement about a guy in New Zealand who has a farm, who has a really nice pig, little piglet friend. The piglet friend's eaten by all of a sudden this like large pig that appears all of a sudden, and it's evil. It eats a clown. Gertrude and Jerry were around and asking around at clowns, and they learned about the circus, and they learned about the flesh pig, and they're like, oh, this clown's normal. This clown got eaten by the flesh pig. I don't care for the flesh pig. 104 sneak preview is going in Ritual Stopped by Gertrude. I think that, this is when we have Tim telling Martin about why he became interested in the supernatural, specifically because his brother, Danny, disappeared. And they always say disappeared when in terms of Danny, because he's not sure if he's dead or not. So terrifying. But it's kind of muddled in its presentation. The depiction of Joseph Grimaldi he was described, and then the characters were like, obviously it's Joseph Grimaldi, and we're like, what? Okay, I guess. And the implications here are not that big for me, because obviously it's implied that Nikola Orsanov was Grimaldi, and then like it's described that Grimaldi came to the circus of the other and then became Nikola Orsanov. That's not until like later, and I was just confused about that, and here adds more confusion, and it's just a lot of like weird things that I just don't get. So unfortunately, it's just going to go in Ritual Stopped by Gertrude. 105 Total War is going in Ritual Stopped by Gertrude as well. I think that, I recently listened to this one, and I think that if I had not, I would have put it lower. But I think it has some merits to it. I think the depiction of the Typing Rebellion is really interesting, but it just doesn't. That's it. With 104 and 105, these two episodes, it doesn't reach its full potential for me. Because 104 could have been a lot more terrifying, a lot more depiction of it, but it just ends up being more subtle sort of implications and like hedging around the bushes and stuff like that. And 105, I don't need like a full explanation of things happening, but it would help to have more details. And the fact that this guy, this general, what's his name? Charles Fleming, is walking around China after the Typing Rebellion, and there's the dead who followed, which I think it just feels to me like they're trying to do some sort of allusion to the things they carried, which was Tim O'Brien, I believe, is the author. I want to read the book. I haven't read it yet. I think it's doing some sort of allusion there. I might just be reading too much into it in terms of the dead who followed. I don't need a full explanation as to who the dead who followed are, but like, I don't even need a why, but I need like more details about how it started. It doesn't have to be I became a slaughter avatar, so now the people I killed follow me or whatever. It doesn't have to be that, but it has to. I want more supernatural elements to it. And John even says he hopes that most of the things depicted were supernatural, otherwise it'd just be mundane. And in some moments, there's, what episode was it, where the things that depicted are less supernatural and more like concrete. Sometimes it's good, sometimes it's not. I think it was pretty good in its depiction of the real versus the supernatural, but I just needed more. It didn't reach its full potential for me. Like, we have, John's in the Pew Songling Research Center, and he's talking with Xiaoling, who is one of the librarians there, who's voiced by Peng Wei. And first she mentioned some stuff in Mandarin, and John responds as if he knows Mandarin and understands her fully. And she asks him if he knows Mandarin. He says, I don't. And it's like another, like, same thing with like the French in Nesting Instinct. This is another moment where like John's understanding a different language because he's an archivist. As mentioned, that Gertrude pulled these statements in the past, but this isn't the statement that he's looking for. And this statement specifically alludes to, or not calls back, eventually leads to 137 Nemesis, because this is where the ship Nemesis sinks. But the ship Nemesis only appears in the first like quarter of the statement, and then it's just the rest of it is just him walking around China. It doesn't really work for me, and I need more. Is just what I'm saying from this episode, and maybe more would be less depictions of different stuff and more concentration on like 1 or 2 or 3 moments. That's what I need. 106, A Matter of Perspective, is going in A Friend of Jerry's. This is where we have Melanie King reading out a statement of Jan Kilbride and his time aboard the Daedalus space station, which calls back to episode 57, Personal Space, where Carter Chilcott, Jan Kilbride, and Manuel Dominguez went on the Daedalus Carter Chilcott. It gets trapped in the Lonely for like a while. Here, Jan Kilbride gets trapped by the Vast for a while, and I really like the depictions. The first part of it, when he's talking about scale and like a matter of perspective for like humans, and how humans think that we are the center of like the super big and the super small, but like we're not. I like that. And then like Melanie King's like voice acting for Jan Kilbride is really interesting as well. And I love the Daedalus and everything with it. And in terms of just like, I forget where I put Personal Space. I think Personal Space better than A Matter of Perspective, but either way, they're both like really good. And then like Dark Matter with Manuel Dominguez is the better one of the 3 Daedalus stories. But whatever, this episode's still very good. I love the Vast. I love the idea that he's like in the space station and he's like floating and he cannot reach the walls. I think that's terrifying. And I love this episode because of that. Also, this is when Melanie is told by Elias how her father died, and it was through John Amherst. And was there a John Amherst episode of this season? I don't think so. Oh, wow. John Amherst wasn't in this season. Interesting. But yeah, that makes him eviler, Elias. That makes Elias eviler. And I like this episode for all of that combined. Episode 107, Third Degree, is going in Moisturized by Nicola Orsinoff. Here we have John in the United States as he is traveling around trying to follow where Gertrude went, and he talks about his investigations in Chicago. I think he ends up in Pittsburgh. He feels like he's being followed by policemen. Eventually, he is getting sicker and sicker, and Elias sends him a statement of Howard Ewing, who was interviewed by an unidentified member of the British Transport Police, and then he gets kidnapped by Julia Montauk and Trevor Herbert after encountering Max Musterman. Julia Montauk, voiced by Francesca Renee Reid, Max Musterman, voiced by Brock Winstead, and Trevor Herbert, voiced by Ian Hales. That's it. So first time that I actually listened to this episode, I thought that so John said he was being followed by like a policeman in Chicago, and then he gets a statement of a policeman in London, and so I wasn't fully paying attention, and so I thought that policeman was still in like the US, and so I thought the statement that he got was about the policeman he was being followed by, and so I was very confused as to why the policeman also was part of the stranger. So I was like, I was confused about that until I re-listened to it, and I actually like the statement a lot because it's talking about like Mr. Ewing, who's like a janitor or something in like the train station, and he sees a train car burning with people in it, but I don't think it's actual people. I think it's just like depictions of people, because the other 2 people he was with, the other 2 janitors he was with, die. He doesn't. And there's a moment where they say that like when he and his coworkers have to go attend to this fire, there's an intercom message over the train station that says paging Officer Sands, and they say Officer Sands because it's code for there's a fire, but they don't want people to panic. I think that's very smart. I don't know if that's like true or if that's a real thing that like train stations do, but it's a very smart thing to write about, especially because it keeps repeating how We do not want to cause a panic, so we say after seance. And so the man, Howard Ewing, is being interrogated by an officer. He's asking him harder questions. So there's like dual meaning in terms of third degree of like fire, third degree in terms of interrogating. And the policeman keeps asking questions and eventually just asks him, who do you care about most? And he says his father. And so it's implied that his father, who died from a heart attack, died because he said his father he loved the most. And so the officer asks what his name is, and Mr. Ewing says, I cannot say. I do not want to cause a panic. And I love that part. Otherwise, yeah, everything else is kind of fine-ish for me. I don't really like him. I don't really like John running around and doing stuff because it gets kind of like muddled and busy with what he's discovering and stuff. And then being kidnapped by Julia and Trevor, fine. So it becomes middle of the road for me based off of those things. There's also the moment where Max Musterman appears and talks to John, and it was a literal jump scare to hear an American accent for some reason. It just didn't feel real. I was like, what is happening? Why is there an American accent in this British story? So I should rank it higher, but it's too late now to like change it. So whatever. I think this episode is middle of the road. It should go higher. I'm underestimating it, but it's whatever. You're a little tilted. This is Luna. We got her for the sofa. This is a croissant. 108 monologue is going in Moisturized by Nicola Orsnov. I honestly also re-listened to this episode, and I would not have put it as high if I didn't re-listen to it recently. It's a Martin episode reading out a statement of Adonis Birosh talking about his encounter with the lonely. He talks about liking being alone. He doesn't like being with people, but he does enjoy the attention he gets from like the spotlight. Like he's on the stage and he gives his monologue to the people. It's Shakespeare, All the World's a Stage. And I forgot what play that is. And he talks about he's able to deliver the monologue, and the people in the audience are rendered as silhouettes, and that's fine for him. But all of a sudden, he starts seeing this Grecian mask, theater mask, and it's just empty behind the masks. And so he starts seeing more and more of these, and eventually he knows that when he's doing his play, so he does his play and he sees in the first part of the play, he sees like one mask, and then later there's like five, and then like after the intermission, like half of the audience are masks. And after the play, his director comes up to him and says, "You did amazing. This was your best performance. Tap into whatever you did here for more." And the director was just a mask, and so it's implied that eventually Adonis Burrows was just going to be consumed by the lonely, and he says all the world's a stage, and there's like no one there to watch him or something like that. It's the lonely. Martin reads it out. He thinks that he thought it was for the stranger because of the mask, but in reality it wasn't. Peter Lucas appears, scares him a bit. Alasdair Stewart, and yeah, I think it's a pretty fine episode. It's pretty middle of the road. And nothing really exciting, but I do like the depictions of theater here. I'm a theater kid, okay? 109 Nightfall is going in a friend of Jerry's. Normally, in the past, I've talked about Julie Montauk and Trevor Herbert, and I never really scored those episodes like very well. I never really ranked them very well. However, I do like this episode because it's both of them, and they're both like talking about how they first met. Obviously, this is John. In the US, they take him to a cabin after kidnapping him. They're waiting for Max Musterman to regrow his lungs, I believe, so they can interrogate him and ask what he was doing chasing after John. And so to spend the time, John gets Trevor and Julia to tell him about when they first met, which is, I guess, partially like compelling them. But no, yeah, it was full compulsion here because I mean, they're pretty open to telling the story. They don't fight against it at all. Julia starts talking about how after as she's growing up, the fame of her father being a serial killer really like catches up to her, and she doesn't like it. But she doesn't want to change her name because it's the last part of her father and her mother that she has, so she doesn't want to like lose it. And so eventually she gets a job as the night security. Her therapist said the best way to get over the fear of the dark, which she had since she was a child, was to make it mundane, which means working at night. And so that helps her a lot. And so she's working at night for like this, I don't know what it's called, like a warehouse, office building, whatever. The DKN Systems works there. And she's talking about how she was really friendly with this one guy, kind of flirting with this one guy. Davish was his last name, I remember that. And she's talking about how she doesn't really know what they were doing, but that was her job. And there's a moment in this episode where she's talking about Barden Davish, or whatever his name is, and Trevor like begins telling his part of the story where he was a homeless guy who's tracking Barden Davish because a homeless man that he knew disappeared, and he suspected that homeless man to be taken by DKN Solutions, so he tracked them to this office building. In that moment, Julia's talking, and it almost feels like Trevor's tripping over himself to get to interrupt her.
At the time, I assumed my awkward flirting had made it weird, but unfortunately not.
Bulbs were breaking because of what they were doing round the offices.
And it sounded to me like him being compelled to speak. And none of them like really like noticed that, but like to me, his sort of like tripping over her words, cutting in, was him like not expecting to say anything, not expecting to say letting Julia speak, but his input was necessary for the statement to be delivered succinctly to the eye, and so he had to say it, and just started talking. And I like that feeling a lot because there's also like play between Julia and Trevor about who's saying who, when, and where, and I like that a lot. And what they're doing with what DKN Solutions doing with the dark, don't know, just dark water. But it's really fun voice acting for me, which is why I put it in at this point here. Episode 110, Creature Feature, is going in with the Ghost guest host. This is a Martin statement reading out the statement of Alexa Crawley and her work with Dexter Banks, and the influence of Neil Ligorio in Dexter Banks's recent movie. And this episode's really creepy. This feels like a more modern like creepypasta in a way. And because it's all like rumors and conjecture kind of deal. And I would love to see this depicted as like an analog horror show, whatever, on like YouTube or whatever. And Alexa Carl is talking about how she works with Dexter Banks. She doesn't like him, but they work amazing together. And at one point, he finds what's implied to be a Lightner, a cursed book. I don't think she ever says Lightner, but it's implied that it's Lightner. And he really wants to make this into a movie, and the book is about like a large human-eating spider, and they make the movie and they do everything, and they conscript, is that the word? They hire Neil Ligorio to make the puppet for the spider, and no one ever meets Neil Ligorio. He's working on the thing or whatever. Only Dexter Banks ever meets him, and he gets all of the actors to come in and see the puppet at first. And then like an hour passes, and all the crew behind the screen, behind the camera, including Alexia, are like, what happened to them? And so they all turn to Alexa Crawley because she is the one closest to Dexter Banks, so she is the person least likely to get fired by interrupting Dexter Banks. And so she goes there and finds that she does not explain what happened. She's just, I tried explaining it to the police. They didn't believe me, so I'm not going to tell you. It's implied that the also because it came out while they were waiting for the actors to come back, that Neil Ligorio died at his home, and everyone's like, so Who's making the puppet? Wait. If you're here and Neil Ligorio died in his home, who's making the puppet? And she goes in and finds that Dexter Banks wrapping the actors in silk. And she calls the police, and the police like confiscates things and stuff, and all the actors disappear. Every year, a desiccated husk washes up on California, and it's implied that well, one of them was named, one of them was identified, and his last movie credit was this movie by Dexter Banks. So yeah, it's really creepy. When I was first listening to the Magnus Archives, this is the episode that I told my parents about because I felt like they would understand this horror more. And so I like this episode a lot because of like the creepiness of it. 111 Family Business is going in What the Ghost guest host. Really big important episode. I already talked a lot about this episode in my season 3 video. It's so good because of everything that I talked about in the video and more. Finally, we have the naming of the entities of the 14 entities, Smirks 14, etc. And it's just a big monumental moment that I love. I love the world building in this story. And so here we get like the full world building, and even then we're still missing a handful of things such as like the extinction and like Robert Smirk's own like perception of it. We got like we've been getting like small moments here or there of like what Robert Smirk was trying to do, but we don't get that until season 4. But yeah, this is really big on the world building aspect. Jerry Key's story is really important here. Mary Key's story is ended here. And a lot of questions are answered for John, and I like that. And it's just a really important episode. This episode, actually, I showed my boyfriend when we started dating because I wanted him to like know about the Magnus Archives, and this episode got him to listen to the Magnus Archives in full. Anyways, but yes, this episode, really important, really big, really monumental for the entirety of the show. 112, Thrill of the Chase is going in Moisturized by Nicola Orsanov. Here we have Basira. Unfortunately, I haven't been able to mention Basira this video. Basira, voiced by Frank Voss, is reading the statement about Lisa Carmel and her murder club and how they are reading true crime stories, I believe. I think it's true crime books, but it could just be true crime in general. And this guy appears and tries to kill them, but the rest of the murder club end up just killing him instead. And it's like he died like a wimp. Like he comes in, tries to kill one of them, they dodge away, and then he's like left vulnerable, and then they all like beat up on him. And it's sort of implied that like it was too easy for him to die. Like he was meant to die. And then all of a sudden, the murder club, I think it's like a total of 6 of them, jump out and they start chasing each other and killing each other. And it's all like the way that it's the way that it's narrated by Lisa Carmel is a very like, we don't know what's happened. Nothing changed mentally. Nothing changed like in their minds. All of a sudden, they're like, let's kill each other. And that's really fun. It was a really fun episode. Otherwise, it doesn't really do anything. Hunt episodes tend to be kind of boring to me. But yeah, this one's going in the middle because of a little fun moment here, but nothing really big comes out of it. Episode 113, Breathing Room, is going in Moisturized by Nicola Orsanov. This is where John, Martin, and Melanie go into a storage unit that is owned by Gertrude that Jerry had told John about. And they find C4 and other things. They find the burned remains of the gorilla skin. And John finds this statement, which he reads, which is the letter written by Adelard Decker concerning his encounter with Justin Go, who is this guy who died in a camping tent, who died from carbon monoxide, and he came back to life, and it's implied that he made a bargain with the end, I guess. And so he goes around and finds people who are sleeping, and makes them die of, I think it's carbon monoxide poisoning or something along those lines. And it's supposedly like he's trying to like he does that to make sure that he stays alive, I think it's the implication. And Alar Decker ends up just poking, I think it was like a grill skewer through his eye into his brain, hoping that it would disable him. And Adelar Decker was like, I'm not strong enough to kill an avatar, so I'm going to do this hopefully to disable him. And unfortunately, it doesn't do much because he's out of commission. Justin goes out of commission for a little while, and then he like gets back to his old things. Like he was sent to like a nursing home or whatever because his brain was messed up. But then like people start dying and he disappeared, and it's implied that he's back doing whatever. I was like, come on, guys, let's not undermine Adelar Decker because he's Adelar Decker. I think that's why this episode's like pretty middle of the road for that one moment of like undermining Adelar Decker. Put some respect on my man. He does so much. He is amazing. So episode 114, Cracked Foundations, is going in ritual stalked by Gertrude. We have Anya Valette, who is transported to a different dimension after cleaning through Hilltop Road. I think that it is kind of boring. There's no much fear here. We have moments where Anya is cleaning Hilltop Road and she is like, oh, this is a little creepy, that's a little creepy. But it's all like within her mind, like she's making herself see these things. And it's very much like nothing would have happened if she just didn't go downstairs. And I don't know if this is even the web. And I mean, it was definitely like a spider that pulled her through the cracks. But it's like there's not much horror here. It's more like slightly creepy things. Atmosphere is pretty good here, actually. Atmosphere is pretty good here. But in general, it was kind of boring. Nothing really happened. So obviously we have Hilltop Road, and we have different dimensions, which comes back in later in season 5, and the Magnus Protocol. But yeah, this episode has a lot of rippling effects in the future, but for now itself, it's not the best. 115, Taking Stock, is eaten by the flesh pig, another flesh episode that I don't really enjoy. It is a statement of Michaela Salesa. He is talking about how his cook had a meat grinder that he fell in love with, quote unquote. He never said that. That's me quoting. Fell in love with, or I don't know. Well, I don't know what I'm trying to say. The guy was enamored with the meat grinder, and then he makes really good food. And Michaela is like, he's making his own meat, but he's not. He puts his hands. He does make food using his own arm, but he makes a new arm using the meat grinder. It's trying to subvert expectations here, but I think the expectation is required for like the flesh, because obviously, and yeah, it's not that like interesting for me. I think it's kind of boring. I don't like flesh episodes, especially when it's about cannibalism, and not in terms of like fear or horror wise. I just don't like them. I don't enjoy them. Okay, episode 116, The Show Must Go On, is going in What the Ghost guest host. I love this episode so much. It is John takes all of the people in the institute minus Melanie and Tim, I believe, and makes them listen to a statement that Gertrude reads out by Abraham Jansen and his encounter with the Mechanical Turk in Grand Theater Buddha. And it's the first attempt of the ritual of the unknowing. And the Mechanical Turk, which is an actual thing that was created in the past of like a chess playing robot, was the centerpiece for the ritual. And I like how they take something from the past and make it part of the story here. Gertrude's reading of it is very fun, in my opinion, when the unknowing begins and she's reading out the weird sort of categorical error that Abraham Jansen's going through.
Then the Mechanical Turk did something that I do not believe will ever fully leave my thoughts, no matter how fervently I might wish it. It stood up. It had no legs, and made no secret of it. Yet still it stood, stepping away from the table that was its very being, and it began to dance.
The depiction of the diction, the syntax, the words being used is so hypnotizing to me and terrifying. Whenever she talks about the mechanical Turk is so exhilarating, and it's just this episode is so terrifying in its depiction of the stranger. And to me, this ritual of the unknowing is better than the ritual of the unknowing for Nicola Orshinov. I think that her ritual is not as good as the Mechanical Turk. The Mechanical Turk knew how to make it interesting. And also, I like the idea that here we have the disruption of the ritual be from a slaughter avatar who has like eyeless soldiers tied by the rope, a rope like around their arms or something, and they pull up a cannon that shoots at the Turk. And so here we have obviously the depiction of the ritual must begin before it is disrupted, which is reiterated multiple times throughout the season, and something that stops ritual, because we don't get the idea of like the rituals and how they're stopped until like later, or like depictions of it in season 4. But this is also like in the idea of like what stops ritual if no one else is doing it. Who knows why that slaughter avatar came in and destroyed the unknowing, for what reason, but it still happened. And it's sort of interesting that like all of our characters that are important in the story had nothing to do with that, considering if we look at the past rituals that we've seen, just the few that we've seen, like the Sunken Sky and the retwisting, Gertrude had a hand in those, and then the unknowing, the characters have a hand in that as well. But this unknowing had none of the main characters working on it, and it still failed, which I like that idea a lot. Also, when the slaughter avatar came, the Abraham Jensen describes him carrying a trunk with a mouth that hates me, or something else hated him. Whatever. He the trunk with a mouth, and the hate of the Turk. That's it. The hate of the Turk. And then immediately once the mouth shoots out, I forget what's described as, probably like a cannonball, but I think he described it as something else. Whatever. Once it shoots a cannonball and destroys the Turk, everything's back to normal. And I love that so much. I love how he is tied to the chair, I think by wood. There's like little like cages with like birds that are like on a string. I've seen those before. I forget what they're called, but they like on a string, and it's something mechanical on the thing that's holding the string and makes the birds look like they're flying. And that's the choir that's singing out. There are automatons around him, and Abraham Jensen kills like one or two of them, but we're not fully sure if he kills like automatons or actual people. And so that's sort of like fear of like what is it that you're doing. The overall confusion, his fear, Abraham Jensen's fear is depicted so viscerally, and I love that. So many aspects of the unknowing, the way that it's written, the way that it's read out is so good, and I love this episode so much. Episode 17, Testament, is in ritual stopped by Gertrude. This is where John gets Melanie. I'm not doing this in order of when it appears. Melanie, Basira, Martin, Tim, Daisy, I think that's it, telling some part of their story before just putting down their thoughts onto a recorder before they go to stop the unknowing, which is like, that's great. It's kind of slow, it's kind of boring, it's kind of a filler episode. This is one of the most fillery episodes. The individual statements don't really do much. The only one that I can really think of is Melanie talking about her trip to India and her being shot by a slaughter ghost and the slaughter bullet, which comes back later in season 4. Daisy barely says anything. Basira basically takes up responsibility for protection of everyone in the Institute. Martin's sad and scared, but doesn't want to be scared. Tim is angry, yeah, and then John burns Jerry's page, and that hurts him. Otherwise, this episode's pretty fillery for me. I wish there was more. There could have been something else done here besides this, but it wasn't. It's just filling in the space between. So it's not bad, but it's not good. Ritual stopped. 118, the masquerade, is going in a friend of Jerry's. This is when John and the I Squad, John, Basira, Daisy, Tim, go to stop the unknowing at the Wax Museum in Yarmouth, and Melanie and Martin stay behind to take down Elias. Both events are really fun and interesting depictions of things. Here we got a full explanation of what happens to the anglerfish's victims. Apparently they get turned into the waxworks, Jesus. And John says this is for the choir in a honestly very chilling moment. He says it looks like all you need for the choir is a throat and nothing else. That's not an exact quote, but that's terrifying to think that they're still alive in there. Martin's burning statements gets Elias distracted. Melanie takes Elias's evidence, and they set up for Elias being kidnapped. We also have the depiction of Martin's mom hating, maybe disliking Martin for looking like his father. I think it's only implied that he looks like his father, but it's not outright stated. I don't know what the implication of his father is doing. I don't know if it's like he was abusive or he was just distant. We never get any mention that. We just get about his mother, but it definitely puts that sort of situation into like our consciousness. But anyways, it's a pretty good episode because of all this, and obviously we get the beginning of the unknowing, and it's really exciting, and it's really terrifying, and it's gearing up for the finale. So 119, Stranger and Stranger, is going, unfortunately, in Moisturized by Nicola Orshonoff. It's going in the middle of the road. I said this before, and I'll keep saying it. The medium of audio is amazing. It does so much. It does so good. There's no other way to have pulled off the not Sasha reveal for those who weren't paying attention like I was, unless it was with audio. No other way I can think of. There might be a way, but no. Audio format, so good for what it's trying to do. The framing device, the context of the story, it makes sense. Audio. However, sometimes it does get a little hard to try to understand what is happening to the story, and that's just unfortunate. 119 is a big offender of that. I think the biggest offender is 178 Panopticon. I forget where I rate that one, but this one's still fine-ish. It's pretty good. It's middle of the road. We have the different I Squad characters dealing with their different things. Nicola takes Gertrude and Jurgen Leitner's skin and berates John, and I remember there was a Q&A session where John was like, yeah, it's a pretty interesting moment where his mother and his father, because Sue Sims and Paul Sims are Johnny Sims' parents, are berating him. So there was just an interesting moment there, but it all is kind of muddled by so many different like sounds, and like it's hard to focus. Somehow Daisy gets pushed into the coffin. I don't know how things happen. Basira gets out. I like that. Tim. Oh, Tim. But yeah, this is a middle of the road episode for me. I think that it's a great finale, though, especially with everything that builds up to it. It's a great finale and should have been the finale, but it is what it is. Because 120 Eye Contact is going in Eaten by the Flesh Pig. I do not like this finale at all. I think that very similar to the season 2 finales, how the action was building up from like the not Sasha attack and then just dropped to the librarian. Very similar here. We even have more of a build up in terms of 116 is sort of high energy considering it's like the unknowing, and then low pacing, low energy with Testament, and then rising for Stranger and Stranger, and then full drop of like energy, I guess, pacing, power, I don't know, for Eye Contact. It's just I don't like this episode. Elias is reading out the dreams that John has while he's in a coma. And yeah, it's just kind of reiterating past episodes. To me, this is a clip show. It's just showing the past moments, and it's important because it's the statements that John gets from someone from live statements. It's important for that aspect, for like storytelling, but it just kind of goes over the things that we've seen. There's no names. No one is named. There's great foreshadowing with Jordan Kennedy being covered alive by ants, considering what happens to him in season 5. Great foreshadowing there. Everything else is just kind of boring. It's a clip show. We're seeing similar things we've seen prior. And when I was not paying attention, I just got lost, just got bored. The only really exciting part here is when Dream John, looks into the sky and he's fully consumed by the eye. And it's like, that's cool, I guess. At the end of it, Martin helps get Elias get arrested and replaced by Peter Lucas, but otherwise it's just whatever. I don't like for this episode to be the finale for season 3 after everything that has happened prior. I don't like it. Like, I think by itself it would have been fine, but considering its juxtaposition between like the really, really high point of the unknowing to all of a sudden now, makes it even worse, in my opinion. Unfortunately, I love Elias. I don't care for this. Could have been something else. This is the final ranking for all episodes. I rearranged them so that they are more accurately reflect my personal opinions. So my top 3 of the season are 116, The Show Must Go On, 111, Family Business, and 99, Dust to Dust. I made Third Degree the second best of the Moisturized by Nicola Orsinoff tier because it deserves to be pretty good. I still think that I am under what's the term? It deserves better from me, and I should have ranked it higher, but I can't change my rankings right now. Matter of Perspective is the best one of the A tier. Best episode of the Ritual Stopped by Gertrude is 105, mainly because I know it could have been better, but it just didn't reach its full potential. 115, taking stock, is the best episode of the worst episodes in terms of it's just fine. It's just my personal preference. But yes, bottom three of the entire show, of the entire season, is 95, Absent Without Leave, 103, Cruelty Free, and 120, Eye Contact. I will stick to my guns. 120 is the worst episode of the entirety of the Magnus Archives, in my opinion. And so because this is the last of my ranking videos for all 5 seasons of the Magnus Archives, I went in and I took like the final ranking and counted how many episodes were in each rank, S, A, B, C, and D, and gave each episode like a score for that. So for example, any episodes in S tier were rank 1, or scored 1. Any episodes in rank A tier were 2, and then B tiers 3, 4, or 5. And I took like total. I listed them out, counted them, summed it, and divided it by 40 so I could get the average score of ranking for each season. So this graph is tiers by season. It shows each tier and it breaks it down by the number of episodes per season. So just to explain a little bit more, S tier had 6 episodes from season 1, 7 episodes from season 2, 8 episodes from season 3, 10 episodes of season 4, and 3 episodes from season 5, etc., etc. And we can see here that the majority of the Magnus archives skews towards like A, B tier, with S tier being close by, and then C tier and D tier obviously being lower because it's a really, really good show. We can also see which season had the most the tiers. So season 4 had the most S tier, season 2 had the most A tier, season 4 again had the most B tier, season 5 had the most C tier, and season 5 had the most D tier, which reflects what I feel about season 5. This table shows each, using the average scores, what the scores were for ranking for each season. The lower the score, the better, quote unquote, it is, or the better that I ranked it. So as we can see, season 4 has the lowest number, which means it was the closest to 1 S tier. You know, if all 40 episodes were S tier, then the score would be 1. And if all 40 episodes were A tier, the score would be 2. As you can see, season 4 has the lowest score, which means it was pretty good. It's pretty close to, like if you would round the score down, it would just be straight 2. So that's almost as if every episode was an A tier. And I remember when I first started making these rankings that I was finding it hard to rank seasons 3, 2, and 1. But I knew that season 4 was my favorite and season 5 was my least favorite. And now it kind of makes sense for me that season 4 and season 2 are my favorites. Season 1 and then season 3 are like mid, and then season 5 is my least favorite. But again, a reiteration of everything I've ever said. The entirety of the show is really good, and season 5 is still really good. It's just my least favorite. Doesn't mean it's bad. It's still really good. And also here at the very right, we have the full show scoring. And so I took the average of these scores, and the average of the show was a 2.735, which if you round it, that's close to a 3, which means that statistically the entire show is close to like a B tier. But that's just because of the math, and there's a lot of highs and a handful of low lows. But that's just what the math says. But what the reality is that it's just an amazing show, you know? This is just what the math says. I like to show graphs here, you know? I like graphs. So yeah, that was my ranking. Thank you very much for coming on this ride. I want to move on to other projects. I will be doing more, moving towards like books that I like, as well as I do want to talk about some shows as well. Just talking about the overall impact of the seasons or the books, and the technique of it, the editing, the story, etc. Just wanted to talk about stories that impacted me strongly. I will keep putting out videos for Magnus Protocol as well. Once season 1 ends, I'll put out a ranking video there. I don't want to make a full season 1 like talk about until I have the full context of seasons 1, 2, and 3, but I will make a season 1 ranking video once that finishes. Because 30 episodes, that's enough for me to like actually start parsing out which ones are the better ones and which ones are not. And spoiler alert, as I'm thinking about it right now, there's been like really good episodes in Magnus Protocol. So also, there's still going to be Magnus Protocol stuff, but for now, I'm putting a rest on the Magnus Archives full season things. I might do like some episode things too, because I also want to talk about like individual episodes and like analyze stuff in much shorter videos than however long this is going to be. And I know that season 3 was really long, but it deserved it. But I might want to put out smaller videos for individual episodes, just talking about the writing of it as well. And yeah. Again, thank you very much for watching. Please like and subscribe and share with your friends. Please let me know in the comments what you thought of season 3. Which rankings do you agree or disagree with? And which episodes would you rank differently than I did? So yeah, stay away from large human-eating pigs, and I'll see you next time.